This is the ANDRA Drag Racing Podcast, the most powerful podcast for the most powerful motorsport on the planet. Tim Baker here with you, and I have a very special guest for our very first guest here on the ANDRA Drag Racing Podcast. It's the man, the myth, the icon, Jim Reed. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Lovely introduction.
Well, I try to make it as professional as I can. Hey, so, mate, you're going into the ANDRA Drag Racing Hall of Fame, the 2016 ANDRA Drag Racing Hall of Fame inductee. Now, let's just rattle off a few little numbers here. This isn't an exhaustive list, but you were the first to break the 7, 6, and 5 second barriers, the first to hold the 4 second barrier. You won 16 Top Fuel Championships. Or was that 19? I thought you won 19 championships.
I think it's actually more, Tim. But if you go back into the late 80s and mid 90s, there used to be what was called the Top Fuel Series, and you were the Top Fuel champion. And then you'd go along to the Nationals, and you'd win the National Championship. So in a lot of the years, I got 2 Christmas trees. I was the National Champion, and I was the National Top Fuel Champion. So that problem's been cleaned up since, where it's back, where it should be as the national champion from the national event. And there was a thing years ago that people didn't like, the fact that, well, you could run one event and be the national champion, but you mightn't have won another thing in your life. And that's why there was the National Top Fuel Championship. So
I see. Well, that's where the confusion reigns. So I apologise for that.
Yes.
But you were also the first to break 300 mile per hour, and also you're the flag bearer for drag racing for many years in this country. As I say, that wasn't the exhaustive list. There are many, many more accolades to your name. But let's talk about you going into the ANDRA Drag Racing Hall of Fame. Some may say it's overdue. Just tell us, how does it feel? Like, you've already been inducted into the International Drag Racing Hall of Fame in the USA, but now to be recognised here locally and for by an organisation that you've done so much for, must feel pretty good.
Look, it's everyone can say it's a long time coming, but it's better late than never. I mean, we went through a transition period of change of identity, change of management, and things just get lost in the archives there sometimes. But at least we're coming in there, and it doesn't matter who was first, who was last. If you remember, you remember.
Yeah, that's right. So just let's talk a bit about your career, and what are some of the outstanding memories that you have over such a long career?
Well, some of the things that I actually remember was, and of all things, the person who started me in drag racing is a brilliant memory, and you're probably not going to believe this because they don't tell this story too much, was a police officer. Right. My son Bruce, who's now 54, was the little fella sitting in the front, and I used to have this habit of racing my plumber's ute across the lights and not speeding, just beat him over the other side and go on. One night I copped a kick in the butt for it, not because I was speeding or racing, because I had my son in the front of the car, and the police officer said to me, "Why don't you get out to that place called Castle Ray if you want to do this, and your son can sit in the grandstand and watch. Next time you're here, I'll book you." And I did exactly that. I went out to Castle Ray. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know there was such a thing as drag racing.
Wow, what year was this?
1965. Yeah, and I went out there for a look, and then the following year I went out there and raced my ute, my plumber's ute, because I'd not long moved to Western Sydney, and I was privileged to meet a guy by the name of Bruce Phillips. There's a few Phillips in my life. Gary Phillips, another big part of my life as well, an alcohol racer. But this guy lived opposite me, and it made it real simple. We hotted up the plumber's ute. We took it out to Castle Ray in March 65. It was unfortunate I won. If I hadn't won, I mightn't have gone back. But away we went from there. And we actually won the 1966 Nationals in the ute for BMS, B Modified Street. And I think we ran 14.37 for a stock standard 179 ute with triple carbs and all the rest of it. And then once you get a taste of winning, away you go from there. It was the same year the Drag Fest was on, and I had no idea there was things called dragsters. It just didn't even gel with me. And I'm standing there working on my ute, and I hear this unmerciful roar, and I actually hid behind the ute. I thought, gee, someone's blown up, and it wasn't. It was two Top Fuel cars going out to race. And I said, I got to have one of them. And the guy standing next to me said, I don't think so, not on a plumber's wages.
So how did you get into Top Fuel then?
Well, I was that keen to go racing when I seen the Top Fuel cars. I thought, I've got to own one of those. I've got to have one of those. And so I thought, well, I better learn to drive a dragster. So I bought a 6-cylinder dragster, and it actually ran 2 seconds slower than my ute, and it frightened the living hell out of me. I was so close to the ground, I got out the other end, and my lifelong friend Noel Eggins was with me, and I was actually crying with fear.
Really?
It scared the hell out of me. He said, wake up, you goose, it ran 16 seconds. And anyway, an hour later, they persuaded me to get back in. I had another go, and I thought, God, this is a bit of all right. And then I built a junior fueler, which didn't exist in this country. I read about them, and that was my first taste of nitro in the junior fueler. And we went to... we won quite a few exhibition races with that against a guy by the name of Billy Fuller from North Queensland. And we then went to the 1970 Nationals, and this is under the Australian Hot Rod Federation at the time. And there was no class to put myself and Billy Fuller in, and Keith Williams and David Harding, Keith Pickett, Bill Pickett and Keith Williams, who ran Surfers Paradise, came over and said, look, to give you a go, we're going to give you a couple of bucks each, and you can run in the Top Fuel bracket just for the experience. So we went out and ran in the Top Fuel bracket, and I beat them all. And Keith Williams came over to me after the event, and I had this man a debt of gratitude like you wouldn't believe. A lot of people didn't know Keith. I was one of the fortunate people who knew him. And he said to me, you need to step up into Top Fuel, and we need a national sponsor in this sport. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? And he said, well, do you want to buy this BB Mulligan car that they had there? And that was my first Top Fuel dragster. And I said, yes, it would be great. But how much do you want for it? And at the time I was racing for Parramatta Spares. And I bought my first Top Fuel dragster. There was 2 trailer loads of spare parts, because back in those days you didn't pull them apart. When I say 2 trailer loads, you couldn't believe I'd never seen so many parts at the time in my life, and the car and the trailer that it was on. And I paid a fabulous £6,000, I think it was, or dollars for it. I can't remember. When did dollars and cents come in?
Oh, geez, you're testing me now. I was born in 81, so I'm not sure.
It was long before you were born. Anyway, I couldn't believe it. Here I am. I bought this car today. You can't buy a rack of pistons for that. And I bought the car and come home, and Keith Williams had given me a phone number to ring, and he wouldn't tell me who I was ringing. And so I get out of bed on the Monday morning, and I ring this telephone number, and the girl on the other end says, good morning, Rothmans of Pall Mall, and I hung up the phone. I've hung up the phone with fright. I thought, oh my God, that was Keith's major sponsor, which was Winfield. But Winfield wasn't invented then. But Rothmans of Pall Mall were not far from my home. And when we'd go to Surfers Paradise to race, here would be all of the people there from Rothmans, and it was just a magnificent environment. Well, about an hour later, after calming myself down and having a cup of tea, I ring it back and told the name of the man I had to ask for, and he said, I've been waiting for you to call. When are you coming in? You must be someone special. Uncle Keith told me you'd ring me. And I went into Rothmans, and that was the start of the Winfield era, which not just Jim Reed, but everyone in this country involved in drag racing benefited hugely from the Winfield era. The money that Winfield put into our sport will never ever be matched. It was just incredible. And a lot of people don't know what they did and the money they spent without wanting any recognition for it. They were right into wanting to help sport along, and it was just, I could probably talk till your tape ran out of the value of Winfield or Rothmans of Pall Mall to the sport of drag racing and circuit racing and speedway. They just were sports-loving people. They didn't sponsor them because they wanted to sell cigarettes. They sponsored them because that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I certainly remember that sponsorship. And
yep.
My favourite speedway driver was Gary Rush, driving one of the Winfield sprint cars. And that's how...
Gary's a good mate of mine.
Is he really?
Yes, I've known Gary probably all my racing life.
Well, I guess you are both based in New South Wales. I did get to meet him once or twice at Speedway Park, as it was then known here in Adelaide. But I remember the Winfield sponsorship, and that's when I was, I was still in latter stages of primary school in the 90s, and I remember the Winfield Pro Series coming on, I reckon it was Sky Channel back then, and we had the VHS tapes, and so I remember when that really
Pro Series was on Channel 9.
And it was on Channel 9, or else, yeah, that's correct. But I also remember those early, I think it was, 92 or 93, was it on Sky Channel as well? Which you couldn't access. I know you could get it in pubs.
I'm not sure whether it got to Sky, but
okay.
I don't know whether you're aware of the circumstances, but the Winfield Pro Series was run by myself and Larry Ormsby from Victoria. Larry and I were great mates, and Larry was a very astute businessman, and there's another guy who deserves to be in your Hall of Fame because the very office you're working in, and the name ANDRA was created by Larry Ormsby and John Storm, and they were the ones who set up and did the division between hot rodding and drag racing and created ANDRA. And Larry was a brilliant business person, and Winfield gave me the money to do the Pro Series and to make sure that it got the right coverage. We went to Channel 9, and Gary Burns at Channel 9 gave us the director of Wimbledon, Michael Williamson, as our director, and Darryl Eastlakes. And then we did have a few other people involved. We did Larry overseeing all of the production, all of the marketing for the events, and Larry, he has to get a huge credit for the work that he put in. And it was just a shame the Winfield Series ended because the money was no problem for us to do what we did, and it was hugely successful. And I don't know whether anything's ever come as close since. I'm not bragging or anything, but I think if you want drag racing to really happen the way it should, you better make sure drag racers are running it, because no one understands our sport.
As we know, the tobacco money is can no longer be a part of sports or motorsports, but it's an important part of our history. But let's bring it back to you and your Hall of Fame induction as well. Mm-hmm. Now, unfortunately for us, you can't make the championship dinner. Fortunately for you, you'll be sunning yourself in Thailand and having a nice, relaxing holiday. So here's the floor. I'm going to give you the floor. What would you say if you were there in your acceptance speech?
Well, you think of all good things to say, and you've got to be careful you don't try and cram it in. But today, without four people who really made my life in drag racing, and it was Bruce Phillips, who's no longer with us. The man was a genius, and he was one of the guys originally behind Graham Cowan with Graham's first Psycho. He introduced me to a gentleman in Parramatta by the name of Bert Jones Racing Cams. And Bert also raced a top fuel car in latter years called the Vandal that they bought from Ash Marshall with Ross Mellish. And Bert, Bruce Phillips, Russell Jones was probably one of the smartest tuners anywhere. I mean, the man won 8 bridge-to-bridge races in a row here, and that's, it's 100 miles or 60 miles from Hawkesbury up the river, and their boats are travelling along at 110, 115 miles an hour, and Russell was my crew chief. And, you could never repay these people because, remember, I'm a plumber. I'm used to wearing and using, a pair of Stilsons and carrying around tin snips. I didn't know what a motor was. I didn't know how to pull a motor apart. I knew none of that stuff. I was taught by these people who I consider geniuses and helped make me what I am. And then there's my little buddy, Noel, who's been with me 51 years. And I never went to a race without Noel. Noel was always there. There's lots of people did good things for me, but the most prominent person that I can ever remember, and he was best man at my wedding, was a gentleman by the name of Ian Kleeman from Rothmans of Pall Mall. Probably the nicest person, and if ever I wanted a brother, he would have been it, if I had a choice. He was probably the best person for our sport and for Jim Reed.
Well, congratulations, Jim. It's certainly well-deserved. And also, thank you for being the very first guest here on the ANDRA Drag Racing podcast. We only just scratched the surface, and I'm sure we can have many more chats down the track. So I just want to thank everyone for listening. This has been the ANDRA Drag Racing podcast, the most powerful podcast for the most powerful motorsport on the planet.